Hey everybody, Steve here with a very heartbreaking true story about greed and how it destroyed the relationship between a father and a son and completely wiped out the father's life savings and the son's inheritance, which would have been very substantial. This is something that happened to a close friend of mine, and it was perpetrated by a cruel con artist who I guess realized she could make a fortune as a caregiver taking advantage of vulnerable seniors. While stories like this are really common involving family members, maybe even worse than family members trying to take advantage of seniors and retirees who are no longer able to take care of themselves, are complete strangers coming into their lives with the intention of taking advantage of these vulnerable seniors in their final years and often stealing all of their assets. I mean, I have heard some pretty awful stories over the years about this.
But this was a real-life story that happened to a close friend of mine just in the last couple of years. My friend's father
was in his late 80s, living alone. His wife had died about 15 years earlier. He was a widower, and he lived in the same city as his son, and his son was working full-time still. He would stop by his dad's after work to bring him food, make sure he was okay. He would go over to his house on the weekends and mow the lawn and take care of things that needed to be done, take him on errands. But he was still working, still very busy, still had his own life, so he wasn't there all the time. But about a decade after his wife died, the father ended up having a stroke and was left pretty incapacitated. He could still walk, but just barely. He could still talk, but he had a difficult time with that. He had a difficult time bathing and just basically taking care of himself. So his son went over more and more to look after him and had really been taking care of him for 10 to 15 years. Well, at some point, I can't remember if he was in his late 80s or early 90s, he started going downhill quite a bit. I think he had a bit of dementia as well. So the son realized it was necessary to bring in someone to care for his dad on a daily basis, since he was still working full time and wasn't able to be there during the day or to visit every single day. So the son hired a caregiver to come to the house each day and take care of his dad, and that's when the trouble started. The caregiver apparently realized what an opportunity this was, that this man owned his own home in a large city here in the US, almost paid for. She also had access to all of his personal data and information and discovered that he had quite a substantial amount in savings as well. So it didn't take her long at all before she convinced the father to marry her. Now, of course, he was in the early stages of dementia and may or may not have even understood what was happening, but he liked the companionship. He liked having someone there all day long, every day. So he agreed to marry her. Or at least that's what she said. And the caregiver didn't say anything to the son about this until after they were married. Well, the son realized what was happening, that the caregiver was unscrupulous, to say the least, and that he knew it, and he knew his father wasn't in his right mind enough to be able to understand what was happening. But she promised the father sex and companionship, and he went along with it, and they were legally married. Well, the son took the caregiver to court, the new wife, his new stepmom.
But there was really no way for him to prove that the caregiver had coerced his dad into marrying her.
There wasn't anything that the son could do. The son contacted social services, contacted pretty much everyone that you could think of to contact to get help with what appeared to be a scam. Oh, this caregiver also was 30, 40 years younger than the father. I think she was in her 30s or 40s. But legally, there was nothing that the son could do. Even though I think everyone realized this was a scam, just legally, there wasn't really any protection for the father. I don't know all the details. Maybe the caregiver was able to find a doctor to corroborate her story that the father was of sound mind and body when they got married. I'm not sure exactly how all of that happened, but apparently there was nothing the son could do. The caregiver completely shut him out of his father's life, so they no longer had any contact. It almost seemed as if the father was being held hostage by this caregiver once they were married, she had all the power. She immediately emptied all of the bank accounts, and then she also had her entire family move in to the house. Apparently most of them were homeless. So now the father was living with his new wife and her entire family and an extended family in the home that once belonged to him, but was now in his wife's name.
So when he died about a year after they married, she ended up getting everything. His substantial life savings and his very valuable paid-off house, not to mention cars and other valuable assets.
And the son was left with zero. He didn't get a single penny from the house or any of the substantial savings and investments the father had amassed over the years, and there wasn't a thing legally that he could do about it. I think this is a big fear of a lot of us seniors and retirees as we get older and if we're lucky enough to live into our 80s and 90s, most of us are going to start having a diminished mental capacity of some sort. Maybe we're not able to remember to pay our bills anymore. Just even if you don't have Alzheimer's or dementia, just normal memory loss as you get older can affect you. Add to that, if you have physical needs like the father did, he had quite a few physical impairments after his stroke and not being able to speak very well, or he wasn't able to get around. He didn't have much mobility anymore, so he did rely on other people to help him shower and eat and do things. And so he was left extremely vulnerable, and I guess he was lucky that she didn't just, once they were married, just take all the money and leave him on his own. But I guess she wanted to stick around. She knew he only had probably a short amount of time left before he died, and she wanted to make sure she got the house as well. When we heard about this story, we were all afraid that she would sell the house, take the money with all of the savings, and just leave him high and dry out on the curb. And she could have done that. She could have just abandoned him and the father, and he would have been homeless with all of his savings and assets stolen by this caregiver. Have any of you been in a situation like this or heard of a situation like this yourself? I mean, other than movies and TV shows. I'm not sure how common it is. That was really shocking, and it makes you feel so helpless because vulnerable seniors don't have a lot of protections, I don't think, in a lot of states. And sadly, sometimes it's very easy to take advantage of them. I'm not an attorney or an estate planner, so I don't know if there are ways you can protect yourself if you happen to end up being single, a widow, or a widower. I think there are certain things you can do to protect yourself, but again, if you have an unscrupulous attorney or an unscrupulous caregiver or someone else who's supposed to be there to look after you in your best interests, and if they turn out to be greedy and evil, I'm not sure there's anything you can really do about it. You might have everything set up in a trust and a will, a living will, designating what you want to happen years earlier when you are of sound mind and body, but if someone comes along later and changes those things, changes those documents illegally, forging your signatures, things like that, I'm not sure there's a lot you could do. I mean, if any of you know of protections that vulnerable seniors can take to protect themselves against cruel, opportunistic people like this caregiver, share with us in the comments. I'm married now, but if I happen to be a widower at some point and I'm the last one standing, how do I protect myself against situations like that? It's really sad. It's unbelievable that scammers can just be so heartless and cruel. I mean, just when you think it can't get any worse, you hear about stories like this. When I heard about it, I was just shocked beyond belief that the son was left powerless and his entire inheritance was stolen by a complete stranger in just a matter of months. And it was really easy for her to do. Very shocking, very sad. So thanks for sharing, everybody. I hope nothing like this has ever happened to any of you or anyone you love or anyone you know. And I hope to see you all in the next video.